Landed in England on the last day of December 1939.
How was the crossing?
The North Atlantic is not a pleasant place in the winter time. We left Halifax in a blizzard, and I was seasick while we were still in the harbor. 10 days on the North Atlantic. It's not a pleasure trip.
And you're not a sailor either, are you?
No, but we made it there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you trained for a very long time in England, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
We did intensive training in England, and that was at the time when an invasion was expected. We spent a lot of time on the south coast. We moved from place to place on the south coast. I guess that was in case the invasion did come, we could do something about it, but it wouldn't have been easy.
Near the...
Can we pull that curtain back? Because there's a little bit of a difference in the shade of
This
light.
way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because it's just making the light come
Right,
in.
of
So you
course.
keep
Yeah.
looking.
I was trying to figure out where it was coming from. That'll do it. Thanks so much. Now it's clear light coming through. That's good. That'll go for perfect.
Yep.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, it would seem strange with the light levels
Yeah.
on your face
Yeah,
going up and
yeah.
down.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Novak.
You're welcome.
Did the men at any point get really antsy, where they kind of, did they want to get into action?
Yes, we often heard that because there was quite a long training period in England, and we did training day after day and week after week from 40 until 43.
Mm-hmm. 3
Yep.
years of training.
3 years,
Wow.
yeah.
Then you went off to Sicily.
We went up on the invasion of Sicily, yes.
So tell me your memories of the invasion of Sicily, of the landing first off.
Well, we arrived there on the 1943, and it was at night, and about 4 or 4:30 in the morning, there's 3,000 ships there. Most of them were battleships and destroyers, and they cut loose about 4 o'clock in the morning on the coast. And I happened to be one that was on the deck. I was on the deck of the troop ship because no troops were allowed up from down below in case of an air attack. So it's my job to keep at the companionway to keep troops below. But I stood there and looked towards the coast, and there's a solid wall of fire, bursting shells. And I thought to myself, that's an unhealthy place to be, and we'll be there shortly. So the first pangs of fear hit me.
Oh, yeah?
I guess that was normal. But anyway, come daylight, we went down a scramble net down the side of the ship into the assault landing boat, and this is quite an experience. You have to keep going. Whatever gets caught up in the scramble net, you've got to keep going, or somebody coming from up above will step on your fingers. So you have to keep going. But we made it into the assault landing craft, made it about halfway to the beach when something unexpected happens. We grounded on a sandbar, and they couldn't refloat it.
Mm-hmm.
So they stretched a line from the landing craft to the beach, which was about as far as from here to your car, a little further, and we were going along water up to here, and we all made it to the beach. But on the way, I had my rifle on my shoulder, like the strap right there. On the way, it slipped off and went to the bottom. I could look down and see my rifle on the white sandy bottom, and I got a little panicky then. I thought, a country with no weapon is not good. But there was a commando swimming around there in case somebody got into trouble. He said, keep going, don't hold the line up. He says, I'll get your rifle. But by the time I got on the beach, he was there with my rifle.
Good. Was there opposition on the beach at all?
Very little.
Mm-hmm.
The Germans, they had taken off. We were in pursuit of them from then on.
That's for the best. Were there Italian troops on the beach at all?
We met a lot of Italians, yeah, but they had got to the point where they wanted to get out of the war, and they surrendered by the thousands.
Right. What were your impressions?
Just a
Yeah.
second, just a second. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
What were your impressions of the Italian troops?
They were not very good fighters.
Consistently? They weren't very good fighters?
No.
Yeah.
No, you couldn't compare them with the Germans. I give the Germans credit for that. They were good, tough fighters.
So what was the first action that you entered into?
We had got inland a little ways. I think the town of Rigobuta was the first one that we had trouble taking.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was just an attack, and casualties started to mount, which we were not used to that. I saw my first casualty there, and it wasn't easy, but I thought to myself, well, I got to get used to this because there's a lot of this coming up. But anyway, and as we advanced to the north, about every town was defended by the Germans. We were on the Adriatic coast side. It was flat country, just like the prairies. And most towns along, they tried to defend it long enough to cause their casualties to mount up.
Then would they just kind of shoot you up a bit and then run away?
Yeah. Laid mines to slow us up. And it was a maze of rivers there running down from the Apennines. It was rivers not very wide, but they were deep and fast flowing and cold. They come from snow-covered Apennines. And we had to wait sometimes at these rivers for a Bailey Bridge to be built. And they usually had laid mines there. So we were tiptoeing through the mines as if that would help. But some rivers we could wade across, some we could not. We had to wait for a Bailey Bridge. And had to have a bridge for the tanks also.
Would they dispute the rivers? Would they be on the other side fighting?
Yeah.
Do you remember any incidents like that in particular that stick in your mind?
Well, so as soon as we started to cross, we come under heavy fire, of course. They knew we were there. The artillery and
Right.
yeah.
There's one incident that it's in Bill Thexton's book that it didn't make it into the Nova Scotia history. I forget the name of the river, but it didn't make it into the history book where several companies of West Novas were pretty much wiped out. Or no, it was Padre Wilmot's book. Do you recall the name of that river? Or
Yeah, that wasn't the Po River, was it?
I think it was just a minor river, but it was a really bad disaster for the West Novas. I don't recall exactly which, because it didn't make it into history because it was so bad.
There was the Po River. We had a rough time, and the
Tell me
the Sangro River.
Oh, I think it might be the Sangro. Tell me about both. What happened at the Po River?
Well, we made a night crossing at the Po River, and it wasn't a very wide river, but it was too wide to wade across, so they had to have boats. And we came under heavy artillery fire because they knew we were coming across the river. And we got across there okay, but on the far side, once we got there, they were gone.
How about the Po? Oh, that was the Po. How about the Sangro?
The Sangro, yeah, we were held up there quite a while.
What was your opposition?
The Germans started pouring paratroops and the Hermann Göring Division because we were getting closer to Ortona. As their resistance stiffened as we advanced north towards Ortona, and they used every river as a barrier. They were very good at that. Every river was a barrier.
So that's Sicily and Italy you're talking about now. Is there anything about Sicily, any other incidents in Sicily that come to mind that you really think of?
No, it was, they retreated, and they wanted to get across the Straits of Messina into Italy. So they wanted to keep as far ahead of us as they possibly could. And it took 38 days to capture the island of Sicily. And it was from where we landed at the beaches at I just forget the name of the beach where we landed now. Anyway, to Messina, where you cross into Italy, it's 38 miles. It took us 38 days to capture the island.
Now, you talk about going into the attack. You, in your role as a sniper, what would you be doing while there was an attack going in? Would you have to advance in line with the troops?
No.
Or were you providing covering fire?
I could go anywhere I pleased, of course. I wasn't attached to the troops.
So what would you often do? I mean, when they crossed the Po River, what were you doing?
Well, I was trying to do my job, but it wasn't easy. And I got across the Po River, and there was a dike. It must have been a river that had a lot of rising floods because there was a dike on the far side, and the Germans had been entrenched in this dike. So, but even though it was a night crossing, they knew what they were doing. They caused us heavy casualties.
So in that, would you see targets of opportunity and try to take them out?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, whenever I could.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Give the guys cover and fire, right?
Yeah.
Wait for this.
So maybe tell me about Ortona. That seems to be the big one. Would you say that's the biggest battle?
Wait till this truck's
Yes.
Yeah?
Just wait for it.
Okay. So tell me about Ortona.
Yes. Well, once we got over into Italy and we advanced up the Adriatic coast, as we got near Ortona, we were having it tougher and tougher. And this was in December 1943, as we neared Ortona. And the first tough spot was that gully. Heavy casualties there in the gully.
Can you describe the type of fighting that went on in the gully?
Yeah.
Why was it so heavy?
Well, the Germans were on one side of it, and we were on the other side of it, and there was practically no cover. You just dig in. That's about all you could do. And the rain of fire they brought down on us with mortars and machine guns and artillery. It was unbelievable. I didn't think we'd ever dislodge them from there, but it was only a short distance from there to the town of Ortona. And there they decided that we were not going any further.
You had already suffered quite a lot of casualties at that point, and the attack into the gully, can you describe the normal numbers for a regiment, and then when you went into the attack at the gully, how understrength you were?
We were way under strength, and reinforcements were not very fast in coming because at that time there was a build-up in England for the attack on Normandy, and that's where most of the reinforcements were going, and we were terribly under strength. There was about 2 men where there should have been 7 or 8.
Did that ever discourage you? I mean, when the regiment had seen such horrible casualties, did you ever did you or any of the other fellas get discouraged and think, oh my God, we're losing, or anything like that?
Well, that's when your morale is down, when you get that feeling that we're losing. But they always tried to keep our morale up. We got them on the run, and we're going to keep them on the run. That's what helped our morale. Even though casualties were heavy, we had beginning to get used to this. Not easy to get used to, but we were getting used to it.
Well, Now, you say the Germans were excellent soldiers,
Yeah.
and they were. How do you feel the West Novas would match up against any German unit? I mean, I know German equipment was top end, and
Yeah.
they were excellent soldiers. But
Yeah.
did you feel that your equipment was as good, or that you guys were as good as your average German soldier?
We always felt that our firepower was much better than theirs. We always had air superiority, which was, I think, was what saved us, what was left of us.
Because it seems like our tanks weren't as good as German tanks. Did
No.
you ever witness any incidents where you were in the middle of like a Canadian tank attack versus German tanks?
Yeah. Well, the Germans said, I don't know if you ever heard of them, the Tiger tank. And we had nothing to stop a Tiger tank, really. They were so well armed. The only thing that could stop them was these Typhoon fighters from the air. The rocket. They have a rocket would blow a Tiger tank up, but we really had nothing to pierce their armor.
So, do you remember any tank attacks in particular? Were they any close calls with any German tanks coming at you?
Oh yes.
Tell me about
Oh
it.
yes. Well, usually in a tank attack, we had to do one thing that I never liked. Sometimes they asked us to ride on tanks, and I never liked that. I didn't have to ride on tanks. I could have stayed on foot, but they suggested that I ride on the tank. Well, a tank is not an easy thing to ride on over rough country, and nobody wants to be on the front of a tank, because if you ever got thrown off, your days have ended. So everybody wanted to be kind of on the back, and there's not much on. There's nothing much to hold on to, only rivets. And I guess we left our fingernails in the rivets. I don't know for sure.
And tanks are a target too. So
Yeah.
did you ever see? I mean, were you close by any of our tanks when they got hit?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Lots of them.
Do you remember any scenarios in particular?
Well, I never like to see a tank hit, because 9 times out of 10 the crew never gets out. It catches on fire, and the crew is trapped. And I often said to myself, I'm glad I didn't go for the tank corps, because that's a tough spot to be when the tank gets on fire.
Max was telling me about when they broke the Hitler line. You had a lot of tank support, but then all the tanks all the tank support got blown up. In
Yeah.
that case, were you there in the breaking of the Hitler
Yeah.
line? With
Yes. Yeah. We lost a lot of tanks there.
What are your memories of the attack?
Well, it was just attack after attack, and some days you gain a few yards, and the next day you lose a few yards, and that was what was the toughest, was these Tiger tanks. We had no defense against them. Mm.
That would have been pretty scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would have been so scary. I guess this. Well, after the Hitler line, there was the Gothic line, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any memories of the Gothic line?
Oh, it was about the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, continuous attacks.
Just
Yeah.
fighting through.
Yeah. Gain a little bit every day, and eventually they have to go. They have to take off.
Could you describe how the regiment would go forward in attack? I know that there was 3 rifle companies. There'd be a support company with heavy weapons. There'd be the headquarter company. Typically, like let's say the Gothic line or the Hitler line, I know they'd be attacking pillboxes and dug-in tanks and machine gun nests.
Yeah.
How would you break that? You're an infantry regiment. Describe how the regiment would break through a line like that.
Well, we always had tank support. We always had mortar support, and that's about it. as I was just saying, we had no defense against a Tiger tank. And they never had that many of them. I don't think they had near as many Tiger tanks as we did, but what they had was more than we could contend with.
After Rome was taken by, I guess the Americans took.
Yes,
took
yes, yeah.
how much further up Italy did you have to fight, and how much longer?
Oh, after Ortona, we advanced north a little. I don't know how far, not too many miles north of Ortona, and it's winter now. We captured Ortona at Christmas time, 1943. Now it's winter time, and it rained continually, and it snowed part of the time, and cold, and we were living in the open, and we was that way all winter. Patrols, night patrols, and it's a kind of a static line, night patrols. And
Do you, you said you didn't have to go out on patrols too many times, but then therefore you probably would remember the times that you did do it. It would be a pretty awful, scary experience. Is there any in particular, any patrols? Just wait a second.
You finish your question, we'll wait till this book.
Okay. Is there any patrols in particular that you remember that were particularly scary, or that were awful, or?
yeah, night patrols is not an easy thing. It's black as pitch, you know, and you're always afraid of running into a German patrol, because they did patrols too, and. I never went on the infantry patrols. One of my jobs was trying to take prisoners. They liked to, our intelligence section liked to get German prisoners. Some of them they got information from, some of them they didn't. And I took several prisoners by being alone. It was never easy, but.
Yeah. Do you remember any prisoners that you took in particular? I read that one account of you snuck up on an artillery observer and put your rifle to his head. Did you take that guy prisoner? Or did you,
yeah.
So tell me about that.
Well, the place called Whistling Hill. The regiment was trying to dig in, and we came under awful heavy artillery fire. And the company commander, he said to me, he said, this artillery fire has got to be directed on us because the guns are 7 or 8 miles back. He says, it's so accurate. He says, do you think you could take a little walk out and see if you can find the observer? Well, I says, I'll try it. And I thought, I don't think I'll be coming back. The exploding shells and smoke and dust. Anyway, I started out, and it was just a mess of tangled grapevines and olive trees that had been blasted. And I guess I went about as far as near to the road, and I was right in the right place at the right time. As I walked along, I was as close as I am to you, and there was a German sitting on the ground with his radio. He was directing. And he saw me about the same time I saw him, and he reached for his rifle, but he was a couple of seconds too late. I had him, so I put my rifle to his head and beckoned for him to go with me, so we did get him back. And I got him back, I don't know how we ever got back. He was more scared than I was, because he's coming under his own fire before we got back to our lines. But I got him back, and I turned him over to the intelligence officer, and of course, they took him back to the rear for questioning. And I got a message from the Brigadier General about 2 weeks later, and he said he congratulated me on capturing one of the best prisoners that had ever been captured in Italy. He gave information that was so valuable. He was so willing to talk. And he had been on the Russian front too, and wounded, and then they would send him to Italy.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's quite a It's quite a, yeah, they'd be tough as nails coming up, wasn't it?
I just have one, I have a drink.
But yeah, do you wanna stop for a sec and have a
Mm,
little
wouldn't
drink of
mind.
water? Great.
I just needed to, I wanted to confirm everything while you were having a drink. All right, I'm recording now.
All right. So, after the Italian campaign, there was still fighting going on in Italy when you guys were pulled out
Yes.
and brought to Holland.
Yes.
So, tell me about when that got announced to you.
That word came to us, I think it was around the 1st of February, or about between the 1st and the middle of February, that we were going to the Western Front and join up with the rest of the Canadian Army. Well, at first, you hear all kinds of stories. We didn't believe it, but it did come true. Towards the end of February, we were all over, I think we boarded the ship at Leghorn, and we sailed across the, I don't know what that sea is called, but between the islands of Corsica and Sardinia, and we landed at Marseille, Riviera in southern France.
Yeah.
But it was, there's where the Germans expected an invasion. It was all tank traps and barbed wire wherever you looked. But anyway, we got ashore there, and it was late in the afternoon. We were given a meal and boarded trains, boxcars, for an all-night trip. And we were in these boxcars all night, and with the doors closed. They said due to security, the doors had to be closed, and we were in France the next morning. So I just forget where we vacated those boxcars, but we were close enough to hear the guns on the Western Front anyway. That's how close they got us. And we joined up with the rest of the Canadian Army, which was involved there in Holland.
Right.
Yeah.
So, tell me about Holland. What was the first action that you entered into there?
Oh, we captured several towns. We captured the town of Apeldoorn, which is one of their biggest towns, and different ones and different towns. And then we got moved over to the North Sea coast. This is where the Germans had launching pads where they launched V-1 and V-2 rockets against England, right along the North Sea coast, in a big. It was a where people go to spend the summer. It was a real nice spot there, and white sandy beach as far as you could see, and all these launching pads where they launched their buzz bombs against England, and we captured them. And then they blew up all the launching pads because they didn't want us to capture these things. They blew them all up, and it was a mess around there. There was tanks and vehicles and motorcycles, and there's truckloads of machine guns. They never had no ammunition, no fuel to move their vehicles. That's how bad it had got for them.
Did the
Sorry,
No
I
problem.
always cough over the interview.
Oh, that's good. Were the Germans putting up much of a fight in Holland?
Yeah, they did.
Oh yeah.
Holland was a tough spot. We had 7,000 fatal casualties liberating Holland.
How about the West Novas? Was it tough for them?
Well, we didn't have that many because we were late getting there, you see. Most of the Canadian Army had suffered heavy casualties before we even got in Holland. But we did. We had our share, I guess.
Any particularly tough towns that you remember? Was Apeldoorn tough?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, because
House fighting?
there was a big concentration of Germans there. And then another town by the name of Niverdal. There was a supply depot there, and that, of course, a big concentration of Germans there to defend it. And then the next tough spot we run into was over on the North Sea coast.
Right. How did you find out about the end of the war?
May the 5th. We were sitting around the ground and in our trenches, and the sergeant come by and he said, about half a dozen of you at a time can go back. It's about 2 miles. Only a half a dozen of you, and you can walk back about 2 miles and you'll be served a hot meal. Well, this sounded pretty good. I hadn't seen a hot meal for months. So we did, and I was one of the first ones who went back there, and we walked about 2 miles, and they had a kitchen set up there, and we were served a hot meal. And this was on the morning of May the 5th, and there was a lad from the signals there, and he had a radio, and we tuned into the BBC in London, and we heard these messages from the BBC, an important message for all Allied troops serving in Northwest Europe at 12 o'clock. So we sat there on the ground waiting for this message, you know. Probably we presumed what was coming up. We knew it was almost over. So at 12 o'clock the announcer came on and he said, here is an important message for all Allied soldiers, all Allied troops serving in Northwest Europe. All German forces in Europe have surrendered unconditionally to Field Marshal Montgomery. And we couldn't believe our ears. Everybody looked at each other just as much as to say, are we dreaming? Do we hear the truth? Can it possibly be over after 5 years? And we sat there for a while, and there was no cheering or shouting or screaming or anything. Nobody could seem to absorb what they heard, you know, but it was the truth. And then he went on to say, all troops are advised not to take any unnecessary chances, because it's possible the German army don't know about this armistice. Their communications are poor. But we didn't take any chances that night.
So, was there any parties and celebration?
No.
No?
No.
Not at all, eh?
Nothing. No. No, I say, I stayed on the Army of Occupation. That was the job of keeping the Germans busy. The mess they left around, thousands of vehicles, tanks were dry, no fuel, truckloads of machine guns, mortars, ammunition. Well, they didn't have too much ammunition because they had spent most of it, and they were unable to get very much in to replace it. So they were happy to, I guess they were happy to see it over too.
The first victory parade that you marched in, that must have been a wonderful feeling, having all the Dutch citizens
Oh
cheering
my,
you,
yes.
and tell me about
yeah.
that. That must have been a great moment for you.
Oh, I felt so sorry for the Dutch people. Many of them were at the point of starvation. The Germans took everything they could get their hands on from the farmers, and the Dutch people were eating tulips. There's something inside of a tulip which they can eat, which kept them from starving to death. And that's how they were keeping themselves alive. Yeah, but as soon as VE Day, the Allies started truckloads of supplies in to, and they were happy to see that.
Right.
After being starved.
And you stayed on for a while, so you wouldn't have joined the West Novas when they marched back through
No.
Halifax. You would have missed
No, I didn't come back with them.
that. Yeah,
No, I stayed there.
that's a bit of a shame. That
Yeah.
would have been. Sounded like it was a great time too. So
Yeah,
that's-
yeah. I guess I should have
Yeah. Oh well.
come back with them.
That
And
was your job, right?
after I went over with them, I should have come back with them. But
I had just a couple other questions, and it's not in any order in the war. It's just your feelings about various different things.
mhm.
So what were you doing before the war?
I was born and brought up on a farm. Farmer.
You worked as a farmer.
hmm
And that's good. What was the bravest thing you ever saw during the war?
Well, I saw quite a few things that you could call it that, I guess. But one thing, I wasn't there. I was there a couple of minutes after it happened. But with Smokey Smith from the West Coast, I was there after he had won the Victoria Cross. After he had did his thing, you know. He hadn't won the Victoria Cross, but he was recommended for it later. But I was at the tank after he knocked the tank out and killed all the crew and never got a scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a famous incident. That's that's a wild, and he's still alive, isn't
Yeah,
he?
he's the only living Victoria Cross winner alive in Canada now.
Yeah, I'd love the chance to be able to sit down and talk to him like I'm talking to you. That'd be something.
Well.
So what? You guys were the West Novas were beside. Was he Seaforth Highlander? Wasn't he, or if I'm correct?
I think he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was Seaforth.
Were you weren't brigaded with them? Were you just
No,
kind
no.
of adjoining them?
No. They were a different regiment, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. How about a West Nova? What was the bravest thing you ever saw a West Nova do?
Well, you see something like that every day, so I never took much notice of any particular thing, but you see some pretty good demonstrations of courage, you know, and it's forgotten about. Get a decoration for that, but not recommended for it.
What was the time that you were most afraid? Do you remember a time that you were really, really afraid that I'm not going to make it?
Every day. Every day. When we landed on the beach at Pacino was the name of the beach. Every day I had the same feeling. I see the sun going down tonight, but I see it come up in the morning, and that's a bad attitude. You shouldn't even think about things like that.
But yet you made it through.
Made it through.
Who was your best friend over there?
Best friend?
Yeah, who's your best
A
friend?
newfie by the name of Charlie Fleet.
Tell me about him.
Well, he was a good man. He talked a lot about Corner Brook, but he wasn't from Corner Brook. I find out later he has a sister living over there. And anyway, he wanted to go out at night. He loved to go out at night and get close enough to the German trenches to stir them up. He could throw, I don't know if you ever saw one of our hand grenades. Have you seen them?
Yeah.
They're quite heavy, you know, and he could throw one of them as far as from here to the road, just like a baseball. And we were trained underhand or overhand. They'll save your arm. But he would get as close to the German trenches as he could, and he kind of chuckled to himself. He said, "I guess we'll stir them up a little." And he would throw a grenade, and of course that did stir them up. But we always had a good hiding place, get in a hole, because they turned their binoculars on us, you know, and but we got away with it many times. But I often thought I'd like to have a camera when he got ready to go out at night, because he was just like a bandito. His belt, a nasty looking knife, and if he could get a hold of a German machine gun, a light machine gun, and if he could get a hold of the ammunition, he would carry one of them. He had little use for the rifle. He wasn't that great with the rifle. But if I would have had a camera to get a picture of that, but we were not allowed cameras.
What happened to him? Did he make it through?
He came back, yes, he came back, made it through, and I learned from his sister that he lived in Newfoundland. He was an engineer on the Bullet. I don't know if you ever heard about the Bullet, the train. Used to cross Newfoundland, they called it the Bullet. And he was engineer on that, and then she said that he was fishing one day and had a heart attack. That's quite a few years ago.
Yeah. But he had a good long life after
Yeah.
the war. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good to hear. What's your best happy memory of your time with? I know there was lots of awful stuff that you had to go through, but of being with the regiment, do you remember any happy times or any great parties or any really fun times that you had?
Well, the happiest time, I guess, would be the time that I went to Buckingham Palace to meet the king. That would be the highlight of my life.
Tell me about it.
Well, I got word that I was to be at Buckingham Palace and for an investiture with King George VI, so I arrived there and got in the palace, and in the investiture room is something like a theater. It slopes down, and the seats on either side, and there was an audience there, and there was a red carpet aisle down the center, and I was standing at the top of this, and the king was standing at the bottom on a small platform, and I had to walk down the red carpet, knees like jelly. But I made it to the king. He started talking to me. I was okay. I got all over my nervousness. So he talked to me for a few minutes, and then he pinned the decoration on me, and that was it.
Can you tell me about why you had to go to that ceremony? Can you describe the incident where you got that award?
Oh, just for saving some lives.
Well, that's a short answer.
Yeah.
I know there was a training accident when you guys were
Yeah.
practicing.
Yeah, there was a training accident.
So can you, I know you grabbed a boat, but can you, tell me about that incident. Did you see it happening? What was going through your mind? Tell me about that.
Well, it was a river crossing exercise, and there was a small boat. It was overloaded. There were 6 men in it, and there should have only been 3. And they left one bank to cross to the other bank, and the commanding officer, he wanted to make it a bit realistic, so he threw a thunder flash. You know what a thunder flash is? And exploded right beside the boat, and everybody stood up, and everybody went in the river. It was a deep, fast-flowing river, and all there was one rubber boat, one little rubber skiff for one man. So everybody insisted that I get in this skiff and see what I could do, so I did. And I got out, and they were going down with the flow of the river pretty fast, and I grabbed 3 of them. I got three of them out, and one, he was underwater, and he had blonde hair, and I just reached, and I just missed his hair, and I couldn't reach him. I couldn't get him. I couldn't reach him again, but I did. I did get 3 and dragged them ashore.
That's great. That's a good incident. It's good that you saved those 3 guys. Did you keep in touch with those guys? Did they
Oh, yeah.
all make it through the war, or did any of them
Yeah, one didn't. After that, he was in the hospital for a while, and he never got out. He had sand in his lungs. Apparently, he had taken in water, and there was mud and sand in the water, and they couldn't do nothing about it. Just sand.
Right. What did you hate most about serving in the army? What bugged you? You guys would have been filthy. You would have been dirty. You would have had lice. You would have been shot at.
Yeah.
What?
You named them all. I was
So
shot
tell me
at.
what you hated most about being in the army?
I was shot at, of course. You got to expect that. And I had millions of body lice. Just millions. I'm not exaggerating that. And I got out for a rest, and the point was I had to take a shower, and they burned my clothes, and issued me with a new uniform. And the next day I had millions. There must have been one they didn't get. They can multiply that fast. And that was very uncomfortable, and especially body lice. And I could look at myself right here, and they were millions of them, just, and it was a bit uncomfortable. But the second time, they went through the same process the second time, and I got rid of them.
Huh.
But the Germans all had lice, and following them up in some of the dugouts they had in old buildings and trenches. That's where they come from.
And that would have been really uncomfortable for you if you're having to hold position in a hole and not move. I
Yeah.
guess as a sniper.
You have to do as little scratching as possible.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite officer that you had to deal with?
Yes. Yes, I did. He was from Annapolis, Major Ken Harris.
Tell me about him.
He was a lifelong friend of my father's, and he was, when the Second War broke out, he was major. He was a First World War veteran, survivor of Vimy Ridge, and the Second World War broke out. He enlisted again, and he only got as far as England, because in England, with their help, but they didn't win.
No. So if you could, please tell us, what do you think was the worst thing you saw over there?
I guess it was on the siege of Ortona, the day before the capture. We were in the outskirts the day before the city fell, and the commanding officer said, "Everybody in your trenches. There's going to be a artillery barrage of 800 guns on the city of Ortona, and some shells fall short. Everybody in their trenches at 8 o'clock." And that's where we were. And that went on till 12 o'clock. And I often thought one lad, a friend of mine by the name of Took, he was about as far as from here to the door from me, and he said, "I'm not getting in any trenches, I'm going to get in the shell hole, because a shell never falls twice in the same place." But he was mistaken. But that went on. That barrage went on for 4 hours, and it was raining and cold. And the next day, the city of Ortona was a heap of rubble. Then, when you get into the city, you're searching for survivors, like German survivors that might be wounded and hiding in the rubble. This is a tough assignment, I'll tell you. That was one of my things I had to do.
You mentioned the seeing a flamethrower, and I mean that's part of their thing. It's fear. I mean nobody wants to get hit by a flamethrower.
No.
Describe the time that you saw a German flamethrower.
Well, I saw one night. I was there near the German lines, and I saw one further down the line, possibly as far as from here over to that garage over there, being used. But it was no threat to me, of course. And them things at 30 feet, they will cook a man and nothing flat. And there's two types. The Germans had two types. One type that a man carries on his back, and another type on a tank. And that is much longer range, about twice as far as the one that a man carries on his back. But we were fortunate. We never run into that many of them, and I always thought that it should be barred. That type of weapon should be barred like gas.
It's horrible, for sure.
But they still used them. So.
And the Allies, we used them. Did you ever see Allied tanks using them on any bunkers or anything like that?
I never saw them. I don't think we had any in the West Novas. I never saw any used, but I know that they were there. In the 8th Army had them, but.
So, is there any other stories or men that you would want to talk about, that you want to make sure that their story gets told?
Let's go by.
Okay. Is there any guys that you remember and you think, I want history to remember this guy, for good or for bad? Is there anything you can think of?
Yeah, well, one I'd like to have remembered was this. I was just speaking about him a minute ago. Was Charlie Fleet.
Yeah.
He was a close friend of mine, and I don't know. Every time he wanted to go out at night, he called it stir the Germans up, he always asked me to go with him. Well, I said to Charlie, ask somebody else. I was out with you last night. Oh, I want you. So I said, well, okay. So I went with him. But he was a good man. You could always depend on him. He wasn't going to take any. But he always felt good with him.
Mm. And as a sniper and a scout, you could go out as individuals, but I guess the rest of the regiment would still have to raid, but they'd do platoon or section size raids, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You have to be careful of your own men too. You know, you're given a password. As I returned to our own lines, I had a password, and I had to shout that, or else somebody might have had a trigger finger.
Yeah. Did you ever have any close calls?
Yeah,
passing
one.
back through the lines? You get shot at by your own guys?
No, he didn't. He didn't pull the trigger, but I was pretty close to him before he realized I was that close to him. I was as close to him, I guess, as from here to the door, and I yelled the password. He just lived up the road here about a mile. He's gone now, but
Jeez, you probably worked him about that every now and again. Eh?
yeah, I thought to myself, I have to be careful from now on.
Jeez, that happens. So Charlie Fleet, is there any other? I mean, you would raid together, but it would just to go and would just take a pot shot and then run away, or
No.
no?
We go out and you could usually find a good hole, you know, a good shell hole, and that was pretty good cover. Usually water in it, mud, but after he threw a grenade at them, we'd have to get down and keep quiet. Don't move. That was part of our training. Don't ever move. As a moving object's easy to pick up. And during training as a sniper, they even trained us how to stifle a sneeze. Say if you're close to the German line, you got to sneeze. They even trained us in that by a sniper from the First World War.
As a sniper, what would be the firearm that you'd be using?
.303.
What sort of scope?
With
Just describe the whole.
With a scope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they didn't have any special, I know they use
No.
Wood Parker Hale,
No.
or whatever.
They while we were in training in England, they issued us with the Parker Hale sight, and then they took away from us, and gave us the other telescopic sight. But you know, it takes a little. If you're not used to a telescopic sight, it takes a little bit of range practice to get used to them. Like.
What do you think's the best shot you ever made? Like what sort of range? What's the best shot as a sniper you ever made? If you don't mind me describing.
Oh, I just forget now. I can't recall anything. I hope they were all good.
Mm.
Sometimes the range is too great, so you don't bother because it only draws fire to you. They know you're out there, so they start their mortars and the machine guns and everything else, and
You don't want that.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is anything else that you can think of that you would want to tell us for the West Novas, for the regiment?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Then there we go. That's
Okay.
great.
Did you know Feller from Bridgewater. What was his name? Feller from Bridgewater. Huey Cuvalier?
No.
You didn't know him.
No.
He's a West Nova, and I think he's one of the originals.
Is he still
Yeah.
going?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. How do
Yeah.
you spell his name? Yeah.
C-U.
Do night raids as much as we did, and then it seems like it just carried on, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they would sight. Show yourself too much and you won't be around.
No. With the regiment?
I think he came home with a regiment.
Oh, yeah?
I think he did, but I didn't come home with a regiment, so I don't remember when he came home.
It just would be tough having done something really stupid. Your newspaper article that he kind of had a bit of a...
He had a bit of a halt in his speech.
Yeah, he originally
He
had a
had
bad stutter, and that was,
He had to learn to speak.
yes.
Hmm.
And apparently Queen Elizabeth had something, not the present one, his wife.